Are we recording? Okay, thank you. Is there some way that we can just pin me instead of the whole group? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, just say hello to your friends online. Okay, great. Welcome, everyone. So today, today I feel like I must talk about war and about the ongoing conflict with Israel and Gaza. This is a difficult topic because the feelings engendered by it run deep and are rooted in trauma. So considering it brings us face to face with important and very often very hard questions. One question is, what does the Dharma have to offer in this situation? How can I understand it? And perhaps most important, how do I respond? What can I do? So Shinchu and I belong to several Zen teacher listservs, and on two of them, listservs for Zen Buddhist teachers, not just Soto, but also Rinzai, Korean, Chan, you know. And so on this listserv, we've been reflecting on this together, and it's been very fruitful. So some of what I'm going to talk about today has been a part of our discussion on these listservs. One verse has been really central, I think, to all of us. And it's from the Dhammapada, an early Buddhist text. And I think it expresses the foundation for all of our discussions. This is the verse. In this world, hatred is never appeased by hatred. It is only appeased by loving kindness. This is the ancient law. So the ancient law, this is the wisdom of our way. And it's the wisdom of other ways too. It runs counter to the tragic characteristic of our human minds to divide and allow pain and grief to create cliques of hatred that results in violence and more pain, deep trauma, and more violence. It's a terrible cycle that goes on and on and on and on. Unfortunately, many, including clergy, are representatives of religious traditions, as well as many, many others throughout millennia, have felt the need to preach hate and division and engage in perpetuating it. So we need to look deeply and consider together how we proceed. We must come to know that suffering, especially deep suffering, cannot be eradicated or alleviated through violence towards those who have acted violently, even though the pull may be enormously strong to do just that. It is unimaginably hard to shift the depths of our minds and hearts when faced with such violence. And yet there are examples of it. Of course, each circumstance is different. But we can learn how to follow this way by hearing from and about people who have done it in their own lives. Thich Nhat Hanh comes to mind immediately, and I encourage you to read his work and about his life. One of the teachers on the list serves, Myozan Kodo Kilroy, is Irish, and sent this story of an ordinary merchant in Northern Ireland, Gordon Wilson. This is from what Reverend Kilroy wrote to us. In 1987, an IRA bomb exploded during Enniskillen's Remembrance Day parade, injuring Mr. Wilson and fatally injuring his daughter, Marie, a nurse. In an emotional television interview with the BBC hours after, Wilson described his final conversation with his dying daughter as they both lay buried in the rubble. His words, "I bear no ill will, I bear no grudge," were reported worldwide, becoming among the most remembered quotations from the Troubles. You know, the Troubles with a capital T in Northern Ireland. Mr. Wilson went on to work for peace, meeting with those who had acted in violence and listening deeply to them. The words he spoke to his daughter in the rubble and his calls for reconciliation came to be called the spirit of Enniskillen. Can you imagine that? Just stop a moment. Just stop. Let's just stop. Imagine that. Just imagine that. I think if we do, when we do, we ask, what can possibly be the basis of such an act? To say those words, buried in the rubble with a dying child. I think the basis is being deeply, deeply rooted in the way. Whatever way can grant us an understanding of who we are and how we are. According to our teachings, our Zen Buddhist teachings, our world is the world of connection, interdependence. Everything impacts everything else, everywhere. Often these connections are beyond our reckoning, but they are there and they are real. How we think and feel, in other words, our so-called inner world, and how we act with others, our so-called outer world, affects everything. There is nothing missing, nothing other. To become deeply rooted in our way, it is imperative that we seek ways to return again and again and again and again to this truth of interconnection. This is not an abstract idea, not something that's happening out there. Our practice shows us directly how to proceed concretely every single day, every moment of our day. So if we want to contribute to the ending of this tragic cycle, we commit ourselves to a path that undoes violence and the root of violence. Each one of us, and all together every day. So then we say, well, okay, how? That sounds pretty grand. How? First step, take your life and your practice seriously. When you sit, fully commit yourself to it over and over and over. When you go about your day, stay awake, be kind, listen, really listen to others. And I'm going to say again, be kind. Be kind. Not because you should be kind or you're going to be nice to be kind, but because it liberates you to be kind. Listen to yourself and come to know your own potential for judgment, harm, acting out of fear, and a desire to strike back. It's all in us, every single one of us. And come to know your capacity for patience, understanding, and I'll say it again, kindness. Taste what a relief it is in the body, heart, and mind and spirit when we act in this capacity. This is not a contradiction to our own well-being. That's not what we're asking for. We're asking to act on behalf of our own well-being, our deepest well-being. This is direct action, a live practice. Simple, true, and powerful. Don't doubt it. And when you do doubt it, do it anyway. There's no promise that everything will work out. We cannot see all of reality. And what we know is merely what we know. The world is beyond what we can imagine. But we can know our own hearts and minds, and we can be fully with others in this life. As we practice in this way, we know what is most true about ourselves and our world and others. And what is most true is vital, strong, and woven completely with the lives of others. In his post on the listserv, Hosan Allen Sanaki, abbot of the Berkeley Zen Center, quoted Martin Luther King, who said, "A strong person is the person who can cut off the chain of hate, the chain of evil, and inject within the very structure of the universe that strong and powerful element of love. The strong person is the person who can cut off the chain of hate, the chain of evil, and inject within that very structure of the universe that strong and powerful element of love." One of the images I think of sometimes about this is, it's like, if you have a row of dominoes and one goes and then it knocks over the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one. We can be knocked over by this, just flattened, and on it goes. And then we knock over the next domino. Or we can sit upright and bear the brunt of all of that without falling over, without perpetuating it. That's tough, but it's possible. I think Martin Luther King's quote sums up pretty thoroughly the vow of the Bodhisattva. The person that has dedicated waking up themselves for the benefit of all. It is the work of strong people joining together and supporting one another to inject love into the structure of the universe. It is the vow of many religious traditions and the vow of many people everywhere, regardless of any label we put on their belief system. Cut off the chain of hate in our own minds and hearts and in the world we live in. Take a look at your own chains of anger and hate, the links one to the other that bind you. Come to know them, the feel of them, the consequences in your relationships, and the suffering they cause in your inner life. Understand anger and hate from the inside and how they are tied to fear and grief and injustice. There's no shame in having these feelings. We do not hate anger. We do not hate hatred. We understand and practice with them. We enter them as a Dharma gate. We transform them into discernment, effective action, and care. We see how they manifest in systems of injustice, harm, and violence, and we participate in the undoing of them, simply in the ways that we can. And we do not wait to work for peace until we are pure and seamlessly kind and patient and always calm. We dive into the messiness of our own minds and hearts and work directly with them. We dive into the messiness of our world and work in it. We stabilize ourselves as best we can. We observe our relationships with others and the difficulties that arise. We dedicate ourselves to patience, equanimity, and speaking what needs to be spoken with respect and kindness and clarity. So this process I'm talking about is not about becoming a wimp. It requires great strength and great understanding, for the results of past violence and hate can be deeply woven into our being. We do not negate or gloss over this. As our friend Rabbi Lauren Klein said, we face it, care for ourselves as we do, and respect the nature of our humanity. With that, we can find a way to join with Mr. Wilson and honestly say, I bear no ill will. Not because no harm resulted, and not because we do not feel grief, pain, anger, and even hatred, but because we seek to see and understand the roots of violence and live in another way, a vital way, connected, honest. To cut off the chain of hate, we listen. We deeply listen to everyone, including ourselves. We do not have to agree. We don't have to like it. We certainly don't need to feel loved. We don't need to have those things in order to speak with respect and kindness and regard the person facing us with curiosity, respect, calmness. When you're listening to another, ask yourself, what is the suffering? Access your empathy, however tiny it might be. And if you can't find it, deeply wish that you will at some point be able to find it. Know that though we cannot exactly know another person's experience, and we should not assume we do, we can know something of their circumstance because we're humans together. To listen and respond in this way, we must be quiet. We must be quiet. Not all the time, but there must be a quality of quiet we can access. And we must know silence. Quiet and silence are essential to our ways of practice. This is a vital quiet, a dynamic silence, not an oppressive one. I had intended to talk about silence today. I kind of keep coming back to that over and over again. And I will another time. But even in this, especially perhaps in this focus on war and aggression, this talk on war and aggression, I need to include it. because silence is what nourishes and supports every aspect of our practice and our capacity to be with others. Without silence, we are driven from one thought to another, one act to another, often heedlessly, driven by things we do not even see. Silence, nourishing silence, not the silence of despair and hopelessness, or the silence of dismissal and shunning, or the simple absence of speech, or an oppressive silence that saps our life. Nourishing silence opens the door of our depths. It allows what is ignored to come forward, undoes our habits of thought and deed, and unbinds us from our delusions. So we become comfortable with quiet, with silence, and learn its many forms and gifts. That in itself is a great gift to ourselves and others. With silence as the basis and quiet as our posture, we can speak with others skillfully. We can say, as the Buddha told us, reminded us, we say what is necessary, what is true, what is kind, at a time that is most effective. And we say it with energy. That last is my own addition. This does not mean we put a wet blanket over our expressions. They can be quite vigorous. They can be humorous. They can be vital. And they will often be messy, incomplete, imperfect, and off. If that happens, if we maintained honesty and respect, we can listen to the other, apologize, and work towards deeper connection. Again, we do this not simply because the teachings say so, or because it's good for the other person. We do it because it's liberative to us. So there's a selfish element in here. Except it leads us to a deeper selflessness. I want to mention one other thing. We so often judge our efforts by the results we can see, usually the ones we expect or hope for. We can and often are bound up in our ideas of success and results, and we often have a very short timeline. So I want to strongly encourage you, us, to let go of this. It is corrosive. It is discouraging. It undermines our life energy and denies us the support that comes from living our practice as it is. It is also at odds with the tradition. Dogen Zenji said, you can only see as far as your eye of practice can reach. It's important to trust that there is more than we can see through the eyes that we have at any given time. Jump into this life. This practice is fully available, without limit, and without being limited by your expectations. In terms of how we engage in the terrible aspects of our world, considering this, I was reminded of a picture of a monk taken after the Fukushima disaster that's on our well-being altar. I think it expresses this diving in beautifully. For those of you that are in the Zendo, this will be quite familiar to you, I think. Can you see it? You know it from the well-being. For those that you are at home, see if we can do this. Can you see that? Are you familiar with that picture? How many of you are not familiar with that picture? Okay, so take a good look at it. And you see, it's a monk. If you pull back, you can see he's walking through the rubble, enormous piles of rubble. And his hand, one hand is in gasho. And in the other hand, he has a bell. And he rings the bell with his hand in gasho, obviously chanting, in tattered robes, with his rakusu on, in sandals, chanting and walking through this disaster. This is what we reach for when the world is undone. We reach for that. We do that. We practice that. Do you see what I mean? He's diving in. He's following his practice. He's contributing what he can. He's not going to change this rubble overnight. He cannot even see the impact. And yet he's acting with complete commitment. This is what I can do right now. I trust this. I enact this. I do this my way, what I can give in this moment. He's not saying, oh, I got to see what the impact is. I got to know what the impact is. No. When we know who we are, and when we return to that, this is what happens. This response, this listening, this engagement. So I want to read to you again to close the quote by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. A strong person is the person who can cut off the chain of hate, the chain of evil, and inject within the very structure of the universe that strong and powerful element of love.